Okay, so and I learned this new thing called spotlighting, so I'm going to do that again. Okay, so I want to welcome everyone to the second session of part of the Igniting the Sparkle Sharing Circles. We are here with Annie Simard and Sandra Fox, who will present to us, as well as Lauraine Wakely. So I hope everybody had a good session one, and that you're going to continue that goodness into our session two. So let me introduce and just say a few words about Annie and Sandra. So Annie is a non-Indigenous educator and she teaches a grade 3, 4, 5 class in Vancouver. And you're teaching French immersion, is that right, Annie? Yeah, good. And Sandra Fox is a how do you say your position? Sorry, a curriculum support teacher for kindergarten to grade 7 with the Vancouver School Board. And Annie and Sandra have been working together, and they have a project that they're going to share a little bit more with us. So thank you, Annie and Sandra.
Great. So let's get started. So hi, everyone. I'm really excited, but a little nervous to be here with you today. As Cynthia said, I teach grade 3, 4, 5 in French immersion at Lord Strathcona Elementary. I'm a settler on these lands. I am currently speaking to you from the unceded and ancestral lands of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation.
And good afternoon, everyone. As Cynthia introduced me, I'm Sandra Fox. I work in the Vancouver School Board as a district curriculum support teacher. I have a math focus to my job, and I met Annie through this kind of job. So we've connected as teachers working together. I am a settler, and I'm coming to you today from the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish Nation, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Today, we're going to talk about an inquiry group project connecting story and math that Annie and I facilitate along with our colleague, Megan Hanna. And our project's been going on for the last 3 years. We have an inquiry group of about 10 teachers, including ourselves. And Annie and I started facilitating it together from the beginning. And we were lucky to have Megan Hanna, an Indigenous education teacher, join us this school year. Originally, we were looking at connecting story and math sort of more broadly, and then we were invited to be mentored by Dr. Joanne Archibald and Dr. Cynthia Nickel and other educators in the Indigenous Culture Community Math Education Project. And this turned out to be a really great thing for us, because when we started our inquiry group, a lot of the stories that teachers wanted to work with were stories written by Indigenous authors or from Indigenous communities. And we've leaned into the framework of the spiral of inquiry, which might be very familiar to many people in British Columbia, at least, developed by Linda Kaiser and Judy Halbert. And our first year in the inquiry, we really just made it through the scanning, focus, developing a hunch, and then we sat for a long time in the learning, and that coordinated with our work through ICCME as well. But we were okay with that because we know learning takes time, and even our work with Linda and Judy allowed us to sit in that learn phase. But in our second year, we really wanted to push into that taking action, because there was no point to all this learning if we didn't make differences for kids. And then this year, in our third year, we've continued that taking action. And then we're looking forward to our last meeting of the year this year, when we engage in that checking phase. Yeah. And so the question we landed on through our scanning and focusing was, how might making connections between stories and math increase students' engagement in being mathematical explorers? Yeah, next slide. And as I mentioned earlier, several of us were interested in exploring math through stories from Indigenous authors and Indigenous communities. So as facilitators, Annie and I, in the first couple of years, used the mentorship we were having through ICCME and to guide the learning phase in our inquiry group. And we used resources such as Dr. Archibald's book and videos from the Indigenous Storywork website to help teachers understand the notion of becoming storywork ready. And the 4R principles of respect, responsibility, reverence, and reciprocity helped us become storywork ready before engaging with math and story with our students. So, for example, we learn about the storyteller, the community of the story, the cultural context of the stories, and amongst other activities, but we also prepare our students to listen with their 3 ears and engage with stories with open hearts and open ears. But through our work together and reflecting, and then our work through ICCME, we've also realized that the storywork principles have been guiding our work in our inquiry group as well.
So the first principle, as mentioned by Sandra, so respect, has reminded us to stay humble in the work that we do. We don't see ourselves as experts. We see ourselves as learners, just like the rest of the group. And we schedule our gatherings ahead of time and ensured to respect everyone's schedule so that we can increase participation. We also had food and beverage, as you can see on the picture here, available to keep our body fueled. And as facilitators, we also felt that we had a responsibility to use our time well. We use Teams chat as a communication tool. And we also asked that our colleagues took on their responsibility to come prepared to talk about their work as well.
We also see reverence in how we encourage everyone to work with open hearts and to listen carefully to each other. And that way we can experience awe in how in the work that our colleagues are doing and the work that they're sharing that their students are doing. And then the final R of reciprocity really shines brightly in our group because we're learning from each other. So Annie, Megan, and I have the role of facilitating, and we've got some expertise in that, but we are open to learning from the participants. The participants are learning from each other, and we're learning from the students through the work that the teachers share with us. And we also realize that as mentors, that it's really important for us to model the work that we're asking other teachers in the group to do, so that taking action step after we've done all this learning. So Annie's going to talk a little bit about how she took action with some of her students last year.
So something that really kept coming to mind was, so how can I support others if I can't even do this myself? I've learned a great deal from Sandra and from many of the sessions offered through the Edith Lando Center, but I just felt like it was really important for me to also do the work. So to keep me grounded, what I did is I used a book that I was familiar with. I chose a book written by Sarah Florence Davidson and Robert Davidson, Jigging for Halibut with Sini. And this is a story that's based on Robert Davidson's own experiences with his grandfather. And of course, before reading the book with the class, what we did is we spent a lot of time reading and learning about the authors. We visited Haida Gwaii. Thanks to technology now, we can just take off using Google Maps. And I also chose to slow down my process by reading the book many times. I think I read it about 4 times, and each time I recorded questions that came. And so what I noticed over time is that the questions became more sophisticated. At first, the kids, they were really, really curious about the halibut, how big they were, how many halibuts could be caught. It was really about numbers and about weight and quantities. How could they fit them all in one boat? So the large halibut that you see on the right of the screen on the wall on its own is the one they found, that the largest halibut. I can't remember the measurement, but they had this halibut, and we decided to draw that and to paint it. And you also have a few more little halibuts that joined our mural. So eventually what we ended up doing is I encouraged kids to create pamphlets so that we could visit Haida Gwaii. So it started at the same time as our journey. Kids were engrossed in their work. They all chose something that wasn't of interest to them, of course. I put them in little groups. So some were focusing on tides. As you can see here on the right, we've got the tide schedule. This was quite complex. So because I teach a grade 3, 4, 5 class, some kids were a little bit more into weights and numbers, but I really let them take off and see where they would go with this. But many were really focused on the fishing part still. And you can see here that one of the group created a schedule for the week. And of course, they started talking about budget because they realized, wow, it's expensive. It takes a long time to get there. So using Google Maps, they ended up visiting Haida Gwaii. They got really focused on just like zooming in, and then they found a restaurant to eat at and a museum to visit. They even went into the museum. And it was really neat because some of the kids were really excited to see part of the stories on Google Maps. I think one area, Toe Hill, was mentioned and they found it. So then they zoomed in and they got to see what it really looks like on the pictures. Sorry, I'm just going a little too fast. So I know that the focus on this presentation is about math, but I think that this is a project that extends way beyond the math. And just doing this, what it did is it gives us an opportunity to connect with each other, but also to connect with others at the school. Really cool moment happened when one of the teachers who happened to have gone fishing on Haida Gwaii, and he knew what it was like to fish the halibut, just stopped by and then started talking to the kids and just giving them advice on what to bring. You need to bring gloves because it's really important. The fish is apparently not that smooth, I think. So a lot of the math that came out, I think it really happened also because we were able to slow down. Sitting with the story, learning about the authors, it really influenced the way that we did math during this project. And overall, I think it was a wonderful learning experience, even just for me as a teacher, but also as a learner, because I really got into this. It was a beautiful experience.
So these are some of the books that teachers in our inquiry group have used mostly this year, but a couple from last year. Like Annie, Megan was modeling how to work with a book and reporting back to the group as facilitator. And she used the book Métis Like Me, which resulted in looking at the math involved in weaving a sash. Annie?
Yeah, and there's one teacher also. I mean, every book here represents a book that the teachers in our inquiry group used. But one of the teachers challenged herself and used What's the Most Beautiful Thing You Know About Horses, written by Richard Van Kam. And she she had so many ideas, and it's interesting because I started reading the book with my class and it really didn't go the same way. But with her class, they talked about measurement, distance, speed, fractions, and also thinking about the horses throughout the story. I remember at one point I got into her class and it was just them measuring each other. They were using different units, using blocks, using hands. So it was just really beautiful to see. So now that the school year is almost over and we've almost completed our 3rd year, I've come to a few realizations. As I mentioned before, the story written by Richard Van Camp, I tried using it this year. But what I did, and I realize now it's a mistake I made, is I didn't keep it at the center of everything. I had so many things going on at the same time that I feel like didn't do a good enough job, but maybe it's because I was also comparing myself with another teacher. Our sessions that we held together were awesome because we met and shared, and we would inspire each other that way. Another thing I realized is that every year is different. The kids are different, and even if you use the same story, it's going to take you in a different direction because their interests are different. So that's something that I've definitely learned, and I will definitely share with the group next time we meet. Sandra, I think your volume is You're muted.
I didn't mute it.
Okay.
Okay. For the remaining part of this year, we're really wanting to lean into the principle of reciprocity and share our learning outside of our inquiry group. So sharing here today is part of that, but we're looking at hopefully producing a small booklet or magazine that we can share, especially within our district, but to other teachers we come across that are interested in this work. And we are really realizing the value of working together in this kind of inquiry group to share and support each other. So we're really hopeful that other colleagues here today might be inspired by the same kind of model and work together with other teachers to connect math and story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Some rich opportunities here for some discussion. I'd like to open it for any questions that people might have.
I also see Megan is here, by the way. So if anyone has any questions, I'm sure don't want to put you on the spot, Megan, but it's nice to see you.
It's quite a rich project that's taken over time. I like how you've been able to talk about it as a growing project, and you've taken it over. This is your third year, and also how you're modeling by doing it yourself, engaging in it yourself, so that you can talk about the experience with other teachers. Pretty hard to do unless you do some of that, and that humility and being humble towards what you think is working and what isn't. I think is also really key there. So I appreciate those moments that you shared.
It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all the great book titles. That's wonderful.
Thank
Good
you.
for you.
Thank you.
And maybe you could share, while people are still thinking of a question, maybe you could share a little bit about what was the most challenging aspect of the project for you, Annie, and maybe also for you, Sandra. Like what was it that sort of you really had to think about, that you not a problem in a negative sense, but a problem in a good sense? What was it that kind of kept you in it because you wanted to sort of think about how you want to do something differently or respond to it?
I think for me, well, the challenge came in between the meetings. The meetings really is what kind of, it was like glue. It really gave me, it pushed me really. If I didn't have those frequent gatherings, it would be different, for sure. So having to meet with people and hearing what they're doing. But the challenge was also to compare, like that idea that, we're all different, but yet I'm listening to another teacher who's using the same story. And then I'm trying to, think like, why isn't it going this way? And why is she going this way? Right. So being influenced a little bit, but also inspired.
Yeah, I
Sandra?
think for me, it's always, I guess the challenge in a good way is coming away with so many ideas every time we meet. And I was lucky to drive Megan home after our last meeting, and we were just like still buzzing in the car all the way home. So to implement them for me with not having a class, like it's finding another teacher that is outside our group sometimes that I can go into to put my ideas in action. But because of scheduling, like that can be a challenge to do it as soon as like I feel like it. Whereas before, when I was part-time in my own class, like I could do it the next week. So it's just having so many ideas and then being able to focus down into one to try in a meaningful way sometimes, because there's so much that comes out of it.
Yeah. I know, Sandra, that you had worked with a classroom, your own classroom, connecting with students in other classrooms in British Columbia. Was that something you might have thought of in terms of thinking about how to connect students in your classroom, Annie, with the students in Haida Gwaii, to be able to talk about what it would be like to be there? So they're traveling there. They figured out, yeah, it's a costly adventure to get out there, and Joe will tell us more about that maybe, but also just the fishing and the aspect of that and what's entailed in that, and the size of the halibut and the cooking of it, those kinds of things. Were those maybe a way of sort of thinking about how to connect the two classrooms?
there's so many possibilities now just talking about
Yeah.
it. And I'm thinking like even, yeah, talking to someone who goes fishing, who has experience, someone who lives on Haida Gwaii, what is their experience there, right? Like even for the kids, it's so weird because for me, like Toll Hill, it's mentioned in the story, but they saw it on the map and they were so excited all of a sudden. And then they knew someone who had gone to Haida Gwaii and they were able to talk about that with them at home after. And they were all excited to know the same place. So for them, for sure, to make that connection in the real world, yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, I'm noticing the times, but thank you very much for sharing and giving us some good points to think further with, and some very rich stories that we can take a look at. Maybe when you're writing up the materials for this, you'll be able to provide some of the titles of those stories so that everybody will be able to access that. So thank you very much to both of you. So Lauraine is in Kamloops, and you're a non-Indigenous teacher at Ascend Online School, and that you live in Kamloops. And I will let you introduce yourself better than what I have just done there, but I really appreciate that you're able to be here to share some of your ideas with us. Thank you, Lauraine.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Wyatt, Tenshi, bonjour, hello. What inspired me was, of course, members of my family who are Métis and Cree. And then my students, I've worked at length with up north on a remote reserve, way up north, and just learned so much working with them. In my current school with Ascend Online Catholic School, I'm the Indigenous support worker, new this year for this position because we don't have an Indigenous person to fill the position yet, but we wanted to get started because we're very committed to increasing our knowledge and awareness of Indigenous education. We've studied the First Peoples principles of learning and found that we have the same principles. We are in the process of increasing our Indigenous resources and building our library. So all the sharing today has been wonderful. I'm so thankful. I acknowledge my gratitude for living on the unceded Secwépemc territory into Kamloops, where two rivers meet. Cooksjem, Marci, Merci, Merci. Thank you. Thank you also for the opportunity to share with you with the Indigenous Math Education Symposium. Thank you. Cynthia. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Hawa.
Huh?
Hawa.
Hawa. Well, thank you so much. It's wonderful to integrate math with several subject areas in teaching. For example, integrating math with history, culture, visual art, dance, and music arts and language. Bringing together math with other subject areas creates knowledge, understanding, community building, and a lot of fun in learning. I find that my younger students enjoy counting in various languages, such as in Cree and Métis, along with English and French. Learning some of the Cree language, for example, really helps learning the concept of zero or nothing. Multiplying any number by zero is always zero, or in Cree, makwe. Students love the word makwe, and I don't think they'll ever forget makwe, or zero is always makwe, especially in multiplication. Measuring familiar shapes in context for circumference, triangles, angles, conicals, and slopes is also very helpful and fun. inviting students to connect with what many are already familiar with, such as their drums, teepees, and lean-tos. I found a lot of students already knew so much math that they didn't realize they knew when they were out in the bush. For example, when hunting and exploring out in the bush, being able to build a lean-to is very important for protection and safety. And the triangles for the teepees, of course. So learning in context is very helpful for students, especially in remote areas where formulas just wouldn't necessarily make sense, but once they learn in context with something they already know, I mean, the kids are so bright. Through learning words in Cree, we are also invited and intrigued to learn about some of the Cree-speaking communities, such as the Woodland Cree community in northern Alberta and throughout Canada. We're also drawn to explore some of the history, current culture, and ways of life, the tea dance, climate, geography of the land and waterways. Strong skills in math can also be developed through the study of ice bridges over the Peace River and other smaller rivers in the north. It's a matter of life and safety to learn about measuring the depth of the ice needed to walk or drive across the winter roads, the ice bridges across the Peace River, the Wabasca River, and to understand temperature. To measure ice thickness, first a small circumference hole is drilled in the ice with an auger. The hole must go through to the ice and the water below. Then snow and ice shavings are cleared away, and the yardstick can be fitted with something sharp on the end so that they can feel where the bottom of the ice is. When practicing Michif, we also learn about Louis Riel and his contributions to Canada, the founding of Manitoba, the Straits of the Great Spirit, Manitowapo in Cree, along with the Red River Valley and Métis communities throughout Canada, the culture and ways of life, the music and the jig, and the significance of the Métis sash. The Métis sash, for example, is a beautiful art for studying patterns in math. I've also recently discovered some of the art of Robert E. Stanley of the Northwest region of British Columbia from the House of Ni Issue. In Northwest Indigenous Arts Basic Form, Stanley describes and illustrates the steps to make ovoids and other shapes and designs. And it's such a beautiful image because everything is created with shapes of the egg celebrating life. There's the cover of one of his books. He passed away in 2011. I'm so glad I discovered his work. And throughout his books, he includes a lot of math. And so when the students are working on the art, they'll also be using a lot of math. From my experience, math offers so many ways to integrate our studies. It is a perfect way to create togetherness, community, friendship, knowledge, and skills among cultures and our wonderful world. Thank you. Hi, hi. From here, I'm going to continue learning. I'm always in the process of learning Cree, Michif, Sewepnik. I just finished a course in Sewepnik. And I've learned so much from you today with centering Indigenous storybook principles, using stories. And as we build our resources and our library, we're just going to have a wealth of books to draw from. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauraine. So maybe if you like, you can stop sharing and I will remove the spotlight for a sec. And we can just see everybody and see if then someone has a question that they have that we'd like to ask to Lauraine. Maybe while people are thinking, I can ask something. Lauraine, you're teaching in the Smekmek area, but you're learning languages from elsewhere. So tell us a little bit about how your learning of languages from elsewhere is helping you maybe think about how to bring that language into your classroom, or maybe you are learning more about the local language that
Yes,
you're
I
now
just
using
finished.
that. Oh,
Yes, I just finished a course
oh yeah,
with
you just said that. Yeah.
with Sewepnik.
Mm-hmm.
It was so interesting.
Okay.
It was
And can you say a bit about the mathematics? Like how is that language helping you think mathematically and perhaps differently?
right now I've just got as far as bringing in the counting with the students. We already started counting in Cree and Michif, French, and of course English. So now we've started counting with Sewepnik, and it's a lot of fun. I have to do some more work and research about how we can include more math.
Well, it's pretty amazing that you're learning all those languages. So good on you for doing that. I guess my question was around also like how is learning those languages helping you think about mathematics? Because the language and math is tied. If you think of French, I can only go to French because that's the only language I learned in school. If you think of 80 is said as 420. So the structure of the language structures how you are able to count. So I'm just wondering if you found that in the languages that you're learning.
I'm not sure right at the point at this point. It's I just find that learning the language, it draws you into the culture and you find out, you learn their ways of life and what they do and how they view things and use, for example, the Sewepnik do a lot of fishing. So I can bring math into the art, the stories, and the act of fishing around the geography, the waterways. There's math everywhere. I see math everywhere. I can't get away from it, really. And that's like when I mentioned about what I discovered up north was every, child from 11 onward, they knew the principles of building a lean-to. They knew what to look for as far as thickness of ice or depth of water. They just knew it. But if they sat in a classroom and had to figure out on paper how to actually calculate the angles and triangles and, you know, the various formulas, it was very difficult for them. But once you had them experience something that they already understood from their own life experience, my goodness, they could figure anything out. In fact, they could do a lot of mental math, whereas I would have to figure it out on paper. But so I think learning in context, integrating all the subject areas, just as our presenters have shown today, is a very strong way for teaching or for children to learn understandings and skills in math. Does that answer your question, or is that?
Yeah, yeah. It gets at it a little bit. So Jennifer has a question, and I think there's a question in the chat that might also kind of hit on it a little bit. So maybe I'll add you, Jennifer, as a spotlight there. Would you like to ask a question? Thank you for asking one.
That's kind of fun, Cynthia, this spotlight business. Lauraine, I'm curious in your local language, in the numbers, if you've noticed what 11 and 12 are. I know that learners often struggle to learn 11 and 12 because they don't really mean anything. And in our local Delcath language, 11 is actually translates into 10 and 1, and 12 translates into 10 and 2, which really makes sense. So I'm curious if you've noticed that in your local language.
In Cree, definitely. Michif is more French. Michif is a lot like French. And Sweatnik,
Wait, Jennifer, which language did you say what that you were we just referring to there?
Our local Delcath language.
Delcath, okay. And it is like a base 10 and 1, 10 and 2.
Yeah, it translates,
yeah.
so their word for 11
Yeah.
translates into 10 and 1, and 12, 10 and 2, and then 13, 10 and 3.
Oh, I think it does. I don't know, but Jennifer, I can find out and let you know.
Yeah, it's I think that language, we think with language and we think with language and math as well. So it's a good question around trying to, in various Indigenous languages, and possibly due to colonization, that aspect of it may be lost or may not be as an and I think actually in Joanne, in Haida language, there's not a word for mathematics, is there? Yeah. So mathematics isn't seen as a separate thing. It's embodied in everything else. So it isn't seen as a separate aspect. So in more sort of Western languages, European language, English, tend to compartmentalize those kinds of pieces. So so then it becomes just a translation of a system that's already been colonized. So there could be an answer to why it is 10 and 1, 10 and 2 in the Delcath language, Jennifer. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Lauraine? Thank you.
I have one for you, Lauraine. I am doing a pottery project where I'm taking what you've said. I'm doing garden markers and some outdoor tiles and such for our school ground. And so I'm doing Michif French and then Tanaha and is it Shekwetmu, Shekwetmek, one of the two?
Schwepnik. I can put it in the chat for you.
I have it written. I've heard different terminology as if you refer to the language as Shekwetmu, but I'm not sure. But my question is, because of the Tanaha piece on our land, there's an Eastern and Western dialect. And so when you're taking your courses, are there different dialects? And so you're kind of unpacking all of that as well. Is that what you're finding?
Yes, yes. In fact, this course that I just finished was one dialect. But if you travel 50 kilometers down the highway, you have another dialect.
Yeah.
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 So it's Sewepnik.
Sewepnik. Okay. Okay, I'll get there. Thank you.
Well, it's very different. There's a lot of throat. There's words that I don't know if I'll ever be able to say.
Yeah, learning
Right.
another language is very, very challenging when you haven't learned those sounds as a young child, right? So yeah. So I want to just thank you very much. I just noticed that we're out of time, but I want to thank everybody for attending this session. Let me just remove the spotlights here so we can see everybody together as a group. Thank you for attending, and thank you both for sharing your work with us and giving us lots to think about. And I hope that everybody has a chance to fill in the feedback form. And those of you who do fill out the feedback form and enter the draw, will enter the draw for 10, we have 10 different, we'll randomly choose 10 different people to win some educational resources related to math and Indigenous education. So please send us your feedback. We'd love to learn from your experiences. And thank you again. We hope that you're able to attend next year, and we'll be in touch. And I hope that you have a good rest of the evening. Thank you, everybody.